We've covered a lot thus far. Engines, instruments, various systems. But what good do all of these things do with no control? The answer is absolutely nothing. You'd think that with such a massive plane would come an extremely complex set of controls. It could be said that the control system is very complex, but, in theory, it is just like most every other aircraft out there. The 747, just like all aircraft, comes with primary flight controls. These are elevators for pitch, ailerons for roll, and rudders for yaw. This aircraft is useless without these three essential control elements. From manual to automatic control, these make up the primary flight controls. Secondary flight controls are a bit more mundane, but offer us better stability and assistance in keeping the aircraft in a good flying condition. These controls are a movable horizontal stabilizer, spoilers, and leading and trailing edge flaps. These controls are essential. Means of control and the control surfaces themselves are two different things. We will now lay out what makes up the pilot controls and following up with the flight control surfaces. The following controls are available to the pilot: 2 control columns, 2 control wheels, 2 pairs of rudder pedals, control wheel stabilizer trim switches, alternate stabilizer trim switches, speed brake lever, flap lever, aileron trim, and rudder trim control. Control surfaces are as follows: pitch control with 4 elevator surfaces and a movable horizontal stabilizer. Roll surfaces are 4 ailerons and 12 spoilers, and yaw with an upper and lower rudder. Rather than confuse you with each part of the controls and surfaces separately, let's break it up into the 3 motions of flight and see how these motions are controlled. These motions, as you may know, are pitch, roll, and yaw. Pitch. Control of pitch by the pilots is done with control column inputs. These inputs are sent mechanically to hydraulic actuators which operate the elevator surfaces. Because this aircraft doesn't directly control the surfaces with cables, the pilots are provided with an elevator fill mechanism which gives the feel of force. Trim is one of the most under-taught techniques in aviation. Pilots are taught to squeak off landings, negative G pushovers, barrel rolls, etc., all being of little importance and are never truly taught the importance of trim. By using trim to relieve excess control pressures, it's possible to literally fly with ease using one finger. Of course, trimming the aircraft cannot be simply taught by me talking about it. It's up to you to go out and experience it. What you'll find is that the 747 is impossible to control without trim. Pitch trim, or stabilizer trim as it is called on this bird, is no less important for this aircraft than others. For this aircraft, however, we do not have simple trim tabs. With such a massive plane comes some serious pitch trim. The entire horizontal stabilizer essentially changes pitch, or more precise a term, angle of incidence, in order to relieve these pitch pressures on the elevators. Control of this trim is done either from the control wheel column or with alternate stab trim from the control stand. Both work in the same manner to provide manual pitch trim commands. Stabilizer trim position can be seen on either side of the control stand. These indications are fairly straightforward, with given measurements. The green band is the acceptable range for takeoff. The white band shows up where the trim actually is. On the freighter version, the green band is extended for broader acceptable dispatch CGs. The FMC calculates the takeoff trim setting based on center of gravity, gross weight, and takeoff thrust to provide the optimal trim setting for takeoff. This makes or breaks a smooth takeoff, as you'll see later. Any unscheduled and/or sudden movements of the stabilizer trim is very dangerous. It seems as though all systems are backed up with a contingency plan. Stabilizer trim cutouts are our safeguard against uncontrollable or sudden stabilizer movement. When these switches are guarded, they are in automatic mode as to prevent any unscheduled movements by cutting out the stabilizer trim actuation before it gets out of hand. This does it for the pitch controls. Roll. Now that you know how the aircraft goes up and down, it's pretty pointless, no pun intended, to have all that lift and nowhere to point our nose toward. Of course, navigation isn't as simple as pointing and going, but at some point a direction needs to be given. Roll gives us that direction. Roll is controlled by the pilot with the control wheel, widely known as the yoke. When a turn is initiated, a mix of ailerons and spoilers assist in turning the aircraft as desired. You can imagine with an aircraft of this size, the ailerons alone would not be enough to turn the aircraft. With that said, the Queen is very maneuverable for its size. Based on the speed of the aircraft, the ailerons are harnessed as to allow for optimum control. Over-control is prevented at high speed by locking the outboard ailerons in their down position. At lower speeds, these ailerons are allowed full travel. Trim can never be talked about enough, so here we go again. Aileron trim, although rarely used, can be controlled from the pedestal by pushing both switches in the desired direction. It is then displayed on the top of the control wheel. Use of the aileron trim is prohibited during autopilot operation. The roll section went by much quicker. Another one in the bag. Now on to yaw. Yaw. Much like the controls for pitch, the rudders act as control for yaw. Control inputs are sent to the fill and trim mechanisms, which then send the correct control inputs to the upper and lower rudder actuators. As speed increases, rudder response and range is gradually reduced. This protects the tail structure from giving too much rudder input. This is very important, as excessive rudder input at high speed is not only dangerous for flight conditions, but hazardous for the airframe as well. To better keep control of directional stability, as well as control coordination, the aircraft is equipped with 2 independent yaw dampers. These yaw dampers are very important for passenger comfort as well. We have now covered the 3 basic motions of flight by means of their respective controls. What has been shown pertains to primary flight controls. It's time to introduce the secondary flight controls. I believe, in contradiction, that these are better stated as the drag controls in a way. These remaining controls, as you may have guessed, are the spoilers and flaps. Spoilers, appropriately named, spoil lift. It is as simple as that. 6 spoiler panels on each upper wing, just forward of each wing trailing edge, make up these controls. In flight, as was mentioned in the roll section, these spoilers assist us in turning. Also in flight, the 4 inboard panels on each wing act as speed brakes. This feature allows us to really take advantage of drag when it is needed quickly. Steeper descents or unforeseen wind conditions are but a few of the times when speed brakes may be used. Although this control is available, the spoilers are not used to full range when in flight conditions. With that said, with the speed brake lever in the flight detent position, the 2 inboard spoilers are allowed half range, while the 2 middle spoiler panels are allowed full range. On the ground, all spoilers, that is 6 on each wing, are available. Additionally, on the ground, full travel range of the spoilers is available. All this is courtesy of the speed brake stops that retract internally when on the ground. During a landing sequence, the speed brakes are essential to stopping the aircraft. By having the speed brake lever in the armed position, and with thrust levers 1 and 3 near idle, all spoilers will be extended upwards upon touchdown of the main gear. This spoils the lift and puts more weight on the wheels for braking. During an abort situation, it becomes critical that the speed brakes engage along with the auto brakes in RTO mode. With thrust levers 1 and 3 near the closed position, reverse thrust levers 2 and 4 in idle detent, the speed brake lever is raised out of the down position into the up position. This provides ground spoiler function during the rejected takeoff situation, as well as a backup if the lever isn't placed in the arm position during the approach. Now on to the flaps. Considering the flaps as a drag control is potentially the wrong approach. Flaps, in essence, change the wing shape and area, therefore giving us increased lift and decreased stall speed. Although more drag is introduced along with flaps, it is better to focus on its purpose of increased lift and decreased stall speed. Leading edge flaps are made up of 3 sections. These sections are the outboard section, mid-span section, and inboard section and are controlled normally using bleed air. Much like the leading edge flaps, the trailing edge flaps are broken up into different sections. Here we simply have the inboard and outboard. These are powered by hydraulic systems 1 and 4, respectively. Let's go over what happens outside the aircraft when the flap lever is pulled through the detents. From the up position, moving to the 1 detent, inboard and mid-span leading edge flaps are extended. Flaps 1 to 5 movement will extend outboard leading edge flaps, and also begins the trailing edge movement to the flaps 5 position. Flap positions 10, 20, 25, and 30 selection will continue trailing edge movement to that position. During alternate extension, a maximum of flaps 25 may be selected. Also note that with selections in alternate mode, trailing and leading edge movement start immediately. However, during retraction, leading edge flaps will retract after inboard trailing edge flaps have finished retracting. Flap indications are seen on the ICAS when flaps are extended and disappear 10 seconds after flaps are retracted. These indications are straightforward and leave little room for interpretation. This does it for the flight control section. Personally, this was an exciting section to learn, as I had no idea how complex the controls were. What an amazing aircraft.